Hey everybody, this is Seth Williams from the REtipster blog and the REtipster Club. I'm here with Callie McGraw. Hey Callie, how you doing?
Seth. Good.
Hey. So Callie has been part of the REtipster Club membership site for a while now. And the reason I wanted to talk with her is because she's been pretty active in the forums and just, mentioning different pieces of just experience she's had and some deals she's done. And it sounds like she's doing pretty good. And, she's learned a lot of things, and I've learned new things from her just through what she's mentioned. So I thought it would be great to just get on a call with her and record it, and she was cool with that. So we all have a special treat. We get to learn from her and see what she has to tell us. So, Callie, if I remember right from one of our earlier emails, I think you got started in November of 2016. Is that right?
Yeah, so I actually probably got started a little bit earlier in terms of when I learned about land investing. Mm-hmm. It was probably closer to May or June of 2016. Okay. And then when I actually sent out my first mailer, it was November and started getting responses. It was toward the end of November 2016.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So how did you first hear about land investing? Like, how did this enter your radar, and what made you want to give this a shot?
Yeah, so I actually was doing pretty typical podcast circuit, listening to all the different real estate podcasts, and thinking about, maybe, I live in Phoenix, so I'm pretty sure you have to have some sort of real estate ambition to live here, or they kick you out. So I was listening, thinking about flipping houses, wholesaling, all kinds of things, and then I was listening to Bigger Pockets podcast, number 39, which you were on, and that was the first time I heard about flipping vacant land. It was my very first introduction to the concept. And so I started doing some research, found your REtipster blog, and found that it seemed like the barrier to entry was a little bit lower, it seemed more reasonable. The stakes of buying like a $500 piece of land out in the middle of nowhere, Arizona, were much more reasonable to me at the time than buying a house. Yeah. And trying to figure out how to fund a house, a flip or something like that. So started a bunch of research and found out that, it could be very profitable too. Mm-hmm. And started diving in. So that was probably around May, June last year. And I went ahead and bought your course and started going through that around that time. So started going from there.
Awesome. Sounds good. So I assume when you got started, you did the direct mail route. Where did you get your list from, and what kind of mailer did you send out? Like, what was your experience like?
Yeah, so I did direct mail, and I started with, your course was great. It's very linear. It's set up, start with the LLC, which I did, got the phone set up, the websites, voicemail, and then figured out which markets I wanted to work in. And then I started when I was working. At my lunch break, I'd go and find an empty conference room and start calling up the counties and asking them for their tax default lists or delinquent list. And, like 50% of them had some concept of what I was talking about. And the other 50% sent me to the recorder or to the IT department or, sent all around. And I got some lists. So my very first list was a tax delinquent list from some very rural areas in northern Arizona and actually a couple other spots. And I got them back a couple weeks later, and they were insane, like 50,000 rows. And they were, the format was crazy. And I've yet to find one that can format out just land. There were houses and land and everything that's delinquent in the county. Mm-hmm. And started going through and scraping those lists around that time. By this time, it's probably been about 6 weeks or so. Scraping those, trying to make them into something that I could actually use. So yeah, my very first properties came off of those initial lists, the tax delinquent, and ended up actually handwriting the envelopes and sending those out. It was about 1,000. Oh, wow. So yeah, my first group of properties came from that list.
Awesome. Good deal.
Yeah.
In terms of the results, like your response rate and like, did you end up closing any deals from that first time around? And like, did it kind of turn out the way you expected?
Yeah, I did. So that actually at the time, so now we're in probably late July, early August. Mm-hmm. I just happened to be quite pregnant at the time. Oh, yeah. So I had the lists all set up and ready to go. And then, I was working full time, and I had a 3-year-old, and I was quite pregnant. Mm-hmm. And so I hit a little bit of a roadblock for a little while. Mm-hmm. So I had the lists all ready. And from that point, I had the baby, and then I was at home. And I thought, it just so happened that some of our childcare fell through kind of last minute. and scrambling to try to figure out what we were going to do. And it's hard to find childcare that you're comfortable with kind of last minute. And
absolutely.
the time's ticking down. You need to get back to work.
Yeah.
And we made the decision, kind of difficult decision, for me to stay home. And so I became really, really ambitious about the land business. I was like, okay, so I happen to have this list all ready to go. It's time for me to get it out there and get moving so I can hopefully make some income while staying home. So this has been a lifesaver for me in a lot of ways. So I had the list ready to go. You're up, as you know, with babies 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, all night long. So I'm like, you know what? I'm not thinking very well right now, but I can definitely hand address envelopes while I'm up right now. So I would take like 50 at a time, and I'd print them off on my printer and stuff them. And then by about the beginning of November, I had 1,000 handwritten envelopes, and these were just general solicitations. They weren't offers yet. They weren't blind offers. And dropped those off in the mail at about the beginning of November. I got a bunch of calls, probably because they were handwritten and they were the text. It was like a good combination of things. I have not handwritten envelopes since because it's a big undertaking. I wouldn't, again, unless I had somebody working for me or something. So, I don't quite remember what the response rate was, but it was pretty good. I felt a little bit overwhelmed because it was my first time talking to people, and I'm sure I passed on properties that now I would grab up easily, but I was really conservative for that first group. And then a lady called me up and had a group. She had 6 properties in northern Arizona that she wanted to sell all or nothing. And again, I was pretty nervous about it, so I gave her a pretty low ball offer, I thought it was. And it was 6 properties for $1,200. And the taxes due on them were small. These are just those like really cheap 1-acre properties out in the nowhere kind of thing. And so I got the 6 properties, met her at a local bank here. She lived in the valley, and gave her the checks. She signed over the paperwork, and that day I came back and I started getting my ads ready. And I sold 2 of them like pretty quickly, like right off the bat, got those sold. And then in December, sold a few more. So that was my first experience. And it was really nice that I had it wasn't like retirement money, but it was some success early to prove the model, to prove the theory that it works. And it certainly left me motivated to continue to pursue it.
Yeah. Yeah, those early wins are super important. That can make a huge difference for a lot of people. And I love this part about your story about how, you have 2 children and you're a stay-at-home mom. I mean, when I got started with this, it was just myself and my wife. We had no kids. I mean, compared to my life now, I had just crazy abundance of time to do this with. And even I kind of felt the time constraints, Somebody like yourself is in a very different position. I hear from people all the time who feel like they're really busy, and they probably are, I'm sure. How have you sort of managed to like stay sane and all that? Like, do you have to really schedule times when you're going to do business stuff, or do you just kind of fit it in every crack that's available? How does that work?
Yeah, it's definitely the latter.
Okay, sure.
And I joked on the forum, and it was a joke, but it wasn't really a joke, where I literally have so we have like a walk-in closet, and I'll go in there with like my list of people I need to call and just like lock myself and make the calls, because it's the only quiet place in the house on a Saturday morning in particular. It was a little bit easier when my son he just turned 1. He's 6 months old. You can kind of set him somewhere and he'll stay there kind of quietly. Those days are gone. And then my daughter would go to school. But it was just finding time here and there. You become really specific about what you want in terms of a property and the people that you're going. I will email as much as I can, but particularly it seems like older people want to talk on the phone, even if you send a blind offer. So, when he's napping, I'm running over to the other side of the house and making all my phone calls.
Yeah. I'm sure nap times are gold for you.
They are. And the short nap days, I'm like, oh. But yeah, so it's definitely just fitting in where you can, and then, just managing, juggling it. What it is. So.
Yeah. So it's probably the kind of thing where I'm sure like the more you're doing this, you kind of realize where your time is best spent and what kind of tasks like just kind of don't lead to anything, like it's just kind of a waste, honestly. Have you kind of figured out what your list of worthwhile things and non-worthwhile things are?
Yeah, for sure. So the thing I try to tell myself is when I have, there are the times when it can be noisy in the house, and those are the times that I can work on an ad when I'm selling something, or my website or something like form or something like that. But the times that it's quiet and I can get away somewhere, that's when I need to be on the phone, doing something that I really, it's not the most professional thing to have kids running around screaming when you're on the phone with people. So, I try to divide my day up depending on when I'm going to have some quiet time and then do those things that require that. Whereas, I can work on a list when it's pretty hectic around here. I can work on scrubbing an Excel list or something like that. So just which tasks need to be done quietly and which tasks I can do in the noise on my own. Yeah. And then the times that there's nothing you can get done. You just have to move on and find out what's going on in the house.
I sort of know what you mean, because I was on the phone with my title company 2 days ago. I had my phone in one hand and my 8.5-month-old son in the other, and he just like let out this shriek like out of nowhere. And even the lady at the title company was like, that sounds like a baby. Sometimes you just got to do it,
Yeah, I've been there, done that for sure. And usually they're like, oh, that's so sweet. They'll talk to me about it a little bit. And other times it's kind of embarrassing, but what are you going to do?
Yeah, what can you do? So are there any like special automation things you've put into place, or like have you gone in the route of like hiring VA help or anything like that, or is it kind of too early on for that?
Yeah, that's my next big step. I think what I need to do. One of my weaknesses for sure is staying organized and capturing the leads that come in and keeping them in one place. I have paper all around me all the time, and I have Excel lists, and I'm trying to keep track of things in the Excel list, but ultimately I have like a bunch of sticky notes over here and pads of paper over there. Yeah. So that's definitely a weakness of mine that I'm looking to address shortly with maybe a CRM or something like that to automate the process a little bit more. I've actually seen a couple things lately that I might pursue, or at least think about pursuing.
Yeah. So. Have you tried Trello at all? Is that something you use?
I haven't. Yeah. I haven't.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like the answer to all your problems or anything, but in terms of like, sticky notes and just tracking the status of one project to the next step and that kind of thing, it's super helpful. I've been using that for like a year now, and it syncs up with like your phone. You can use it on your desktop, on your iPad, anything. So it's kind of nice, and it's free. So it might be worth checking out.
Is it a CRM?
I wouldn't go that far. It's more like a project management, task management kind of thing. At least that's kind of how I use it and look at it. Maybe there are people using it for CRM stuff, but say if there's like, a deal and you have like the name of the deal, I don't know if it's the street name or the owner name or something, and there's different like slots in terms of like, this is a prospect. Okay, now it's in closing. Okay, now I own it. Okay, now it's listed. Now it's sold, that kind of thing. You can kind of like drag it from one. Through. Yeah, so you can just kind of keep a clear vision of like, okay, this is what needs to be sold. This is what needs to be closed. This is what I need to follow up on, things like that. So I don't think that's like a full-blown CRM kind of solution, but just in terms of like keeping your tasks straight and organized, it's kind of helpful.
Yeah, that actually, I will check that out for sure. And when I've kind of moved to a model of fewer properties, potentially higher dollar properties and fewer of them from a higher volume model, which was just like, I got to a point where I was like, okay, I don't remember if I was buying that one or if I was selling that one and what I need to do next. So that would be very helpful in particular for that. So I'll check it out.
Yeah, cool. I was just wondering, a question that came up earlier when you were talking. I know you said you sort of hand wrote addresses and you're not really doing that anymore. Have you noticed any difference in like response rate or anything like that? Because I've actually never done I've done the handwritten font a lot, but never like actually handwriting it with a pen in my own hand or anything. So does it make a difference or not really?
I don't know, because I only did it the one time.
Sure.
And it was a tax default list. And since then I've moved to Agent Pro 24/7.
Sure.
So there's a lot of confounding variables there. So I don't know if it was the handwritten envelope or if it was the type of list. So probably need to do a little bit more split testing to find out exactly the effect of the handwritten envelope. But I do think that just naturally, if I'm going through a stack of mail, I'm going to open the one that has it's just written to me.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think on that one, I just did like my address on the top. I didn't put like from an LLC. I just had like my return address, and then I hand wrote their name and address. And so I might even, what I consider doing, but again, I'd pay somebody to do this at this point, have like a greeting card almost. So it looks like you're getting a greeting card in the mail and it's handwritten to you. maybe even without a return address. So there's a lot of things you could probably do that I haven't explored completely. But luckily in land, it's really a numbers game. So if you send out enough, so the question is, do you want to spend your time and your money on figuring out, the envelope or just send 250 more of them?
Yeah.
Because you can get away with that, at least at this point. That I have found, just send a few more of them and you're going to get the same response rate. So where do you want to spend your time and money?
Yeah. I think that's a big part of really any business is just kind of figuring out what works. And then when you know it, like just do more of that, just kind of scale it up a little bit. So I think there's a lot of truth there. If you wouldn't mind sharing, I mean, what are some of the deals you've done? Like what do the numbers look like? I know you had sent me a little summary email earlier. It looks like at one point you did kind of a huge one. I don't know, maybe just tell us about some of that. How does it work?
Yeah, for sure. So I had those first 6 and I got those kind of sold off slowly by the end of 2016, early 2017. And I kept mailing. At that point, I moved into postcards and like I said, AJ Pro 24/7. I kind of worked off those lists a little bit longer. At that point, they had gotten kind of old and I knew that, but they were all ready and I just needed to send out mail. So I just went for it. And I sent postcards off of those too. And then, so I just kept sending mail to the same general area. I'm from Arizona, so I know the area pretty well. I know it's popular, but I went with what I knew. Yeah. And then from there, I got a 5-acre property. So, I sold those. They were like $200 a piece with probably $10 or $15 in past due taxes. I did all self-closing when I bought them. So I had them all for probably a total of $225. Wow. And I sold them each for somewhere between $1,300 and I want to say $1,600 each. So, again, they weren't huge numbers, but in terms of ROI, it was really good. Yeah. And I took that money and I bought a 5-acre for $1,000, sold it for $3,000. And then a 40-acre came in. I bought that for $3,000. I sold it for $6,900 or $7,000. So it just kind of snowballed from there. I've got a few other 1-acre properties came in, and
just to be clear, You've obviously never lost money and you've never broken even. I mean, every deal has been very, very healthy profit margins for you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. So I felt pretty comfortable, especially when I was getting started. Like I said, I was very conservative. So I passed on things that I probably shouldn't have looking back now. But I knew when I bought it that I was going to make money. And I didn't question that, at least at that point.
Yeah, sure.
So it kind of snowballed. And this is probably around the second quarter of 2017 now. And I had bought and sold 10. I had a couple stragglers maybe that were still on the market, but 10. And I had self-closed and all of the, when I bought them all and when I sold them all. So I felt really comfortable with that process. But at the same time, it was, it's a lot of detail work. And your module on self-closing was huge. I mean, I literally, especially in the beginning, go through like line by line, like, okay, I did that. And then go to the next line. So the first like 3 or 4 properties, it was like step by step. And by the end, I was by the 5th or 6th property, I could do it without looking anything. I had all the documents. You just change out the names and how taking title and stuff like that. So got really comfortable with that process, which was nice. And then it was around May or so of the year, I thought, I'd like to try a property that I don't have to self-close on, that it would be a big enough margin or dollar value that it would warrant going through title. Not because it's particularly difficult to self-close. It's just that, I have like a 6-month-old and we're going to the bank and Chase has decided they're not doing notaries anymore. So I have to go to the credit union and then go to the UPS store. And
that's a lot of extra work to close it for sure.
It's just running around. And I thought, it's time to move in. I've done 10. Let's try something else. So I moved into a strategy of, I knew that if I wanted to use a title company, there's kind of like that $5,000 to $10,000, not rule, but kind of rule of thumb that you've mentioned, just to make sure that it makes sense to pay for a title company. Yeah. So I started looking around in Arizona again, the areas that I knew were kind of high dollar properties. And I sent off a small list. I spent a lot of time pricing them. So at this point, I transitioned to blind offers and went through all the information on that. So spent some time figuring that out. And then I had moved, of course, to, who was I using? Direct mail, direct letter printing. Yeah. Letter print. Yeah. And so I had a cover letter and then the blind offer. And I found I spent a lot of time pricing like a 300-piece mailer of just kind of areas around the state that I knew that were kind of high dollar. But I sent probably 15%, 20% market value on those. Sent them off. And then we just happened to have it. We went on vacation to California for a week, came back. And I had some voicemails, some angry people, and some emails. And then about a week later, I got one in the mail. It was a signed offer. It was for $15,000. And I thought, what was it? I'm not going to spend $15,000 on property. Was I crazy?
Why didn't I make this offer?
Why did I do this? I'm going to have to call her and tell her no. But so I came back and I was, the whole way driving home from the mailbox, like, yeah, okay, let's take a look at this. So I look it up and the lot right next door, I mean, like literally right next door, and this does not happen very often when you're looking for comps. It was the same size, pretty much the same attributes, same views of the mountains, same pine trees and all that. And it sold for $97,000 in November 2016.
Wow,
and
nice.
So I was like, okay, well, maybe I can make this happen.
Yeah.
So I stayed up until like 2 a.m. looking at everything. But I was like on the GIS site, on there, looking at all the chain of title, doing everything. I spent like 5 hours that night completely researching it, and I couldn't find any reason why I shouldn't buy it.
Yeah.
So I called her up the next morning, and it was like the quickest seller conversation I've ever had. At the time, it kind of made me nervous. Looking back, it was like the perfect transaction ever. It was like yes, no answers to everything. I looked down at my phone. It was less than a 3-minute phone call.
Whoa, crazy.
Yeah. And so I called the title company. I found one that was kind of local that would do it for $600 with title policy and everything, which is a good deal here, especially. And did a title close, and it took me a little while to pull the trigger. And finally, I signed it. I sent it in. It was a clean title. Everything came back good on it. At the same time, there was also a property that's actually not too far to Phoenix that came back on that I loaded the kids up in the minivan. We went and we drove out, took a look at it. We're bumping along in the minivan on the dirt road. Took some pictures. And that one, that property was interesting. It was 1 acre. It was kind of like a little affluent pocket just outside of the valley that, but it had power lines bisecting it, so I wasn't quite sure about the value of it. And so I put it under contract and explained how wholesaling works, or essentially assigning the contract. So I started working on that one too. So in the meantime, the one in northern Arizona was going through title. It felt like it took forever, especially once you self-close a few times. I was like, this could be a week tops.
They go way slower for sure.
Well, it was a blind offer, so and she responded pretty quickly, but I put like a 60-day close date on it. And I talked to the title company. I was like, well, how long will it take? I know I have July 31st on the contract, but, can you do it sooner than that? She's like, oh, yeah, no problem, like 2 weeks tops. Well, it closed. It took like 4.5 weeks. It closed on 31st.
Yeah,
so,
man.
Yeah, I know.
I get that a lot, too, though. It's like, why don't they just say what's true? Like, it's easier for everybody if you just set the right expectations. That seems like a common thing I've encountered a lot too. It's kind of annoying.
Yeah, it is super annoying. And when you kind of pull the curtain back on the process and you know what goes into it, I don't know why this is taking. I get that I'm not the only person's property that you're working on, but at the same time, So I was nervous the whole time, so it felt like it took forever, and it was a large chunk of what I had made to that point. And I knew I would be tying up my capital when I went to buy it, so there wasn't a lot I could do in the meantime. So I was kind of sitting around. I was working on that one. I thought, well, I'll assign it, and then I don't have to come out of pocket at all, which was great. So eventually that one closed on July 31st, which was a Monday. And then I got everything in. Everything was good to go. It was mine. So on Tuesday morning, I blasted it out there everywhere. Got a few calls, not a whole lot. I'm sweating a little bit. And then on Friday morning, a lady called, and they were like, we want it. Don't sell it to anybody else. Where do I send the check? How soon can we close? You're saying all the right things here.
Yeah, seriously.
So they actually, and I was like, well, I just closed with this title company. It's local to the property. It makes sense. I probably should have just kept it open now that I think about it, because it was so quick. I explained to her that I was flipping it, but I don't think she really understood how quickly I was looking to do it. So it actually completely closed. And I was like, well, they just issued a title policy on it for, I didn't say, but it was a much smaller amount than this. Oh, I had listed it for $49,000. I'm sure I could have gotten more on it, but I thought, that's half of what, and I talked about it. I did like a little listing video. I'm like, this property here sold for $97, and I'm listing this for $49, so it's like half. And I made a big deal about it being half. Yeah. So I tried to make a big deal about that. What a great deal it was, and everything that I put out. And they were really serious about it. They actually pushed her. I think it kind of annoyed her a little bit, but she ended up closing in 1 week. So. Yeah, I got it listed everywhere on a Tuesday morning. I owned it on Monday, and not that Friday, but the Friday after it closed, I sold it for $49,000.
That is crazy, man. That is so awesome. Good for you.
Yeah, thank you. It was such a sigh of relief. That whole week that they were closing on when I was selling it, I was still nervous. I'm like, I don't know why I'm so nervous. I just am.
Yeah,
because that's a big chunk of what I've done so far.
So, and you said so you sold that on early August, right? or mid-August?
No, it was early. So I closed when I bought it on July 31st. And it wasn't that Friday, but the Friday after. So I think it was like August, I want to say like the 12th or something like that. It was that Friday. And then, I was assigning that other contract and I found a buyer. That one also, I learned some lessons from these two properties. So that one I put up, I got under contract. I explained I was going to be assigning it about the power lines and everything. And I put it on Craigslist. I had just gotten to Craigslist and it was probably 20 minutes later. Like I literally put my son down for a nap. It was like 9 o'clock in the morning. I got everything listed, and then my phone started ringing at 9:20. Wow. And so I run over to the other side of the house. I started answering the phone, and it was the same thing. He was like, "I want that property. Do not sell it to anybody else." He was a builder, so he understood wholesaling, which was great.
Yeah, that's great.
And that one ended up being a little bit of a pain in terms of there was a well on the property, and then the owners had, in the chain of title, it showed that they had sold off the rights to the well that was on the property.
Oh, weird.
But then it turns out they didn't.
Okay.
And I know. Yeah. So what I learned about that one was, so I had the contract from the seller is I went and I found a buyer and got that under, I had the assignment agreement signed, and I took both pieces and I sent them to the title company. And when they opened title, there were some issues that came up. So in retrospect, I should have just taken the original purchase agreement from the seller, opened up title on it, and then found the end buyer so they could start doing some of the work on it. Because what happened was, and I didn't really know how to price it because it's worth a lot more than what I ended up selling it for. But I wasn't sure about the value because of those power lines.
Yeah.
So I had it under contract for $15,000. And I was like, well, let me just put it up for 25 and maybe somebody will negotiate me down. He was like, no, 25 cash, no problem. I was like, okay. So then I sent over the assignment agreement. It showed the $10,000 spread. And he was like, yeah, that's kind of a lot. I'm like, yeah, I know, but it's still a great deal. He's like, yeah, okay. So he was okay with it. And then this well issue came up during the process. And so I was like, well, if you still want it, I'll bring it down to $20,000. I'll make my assignment fee $5,000 and we'll keep going on it. He's like, yeah, that works. Well, then it comes up that actually they do have the rights to the well still. So I easily could have made more on that. But you know what? I was $0 into it.
Yeah.
It's not bad. Making $5,000 on nothing. So that one, it took a little while because it was owned by a trust. It was like a whole family and they had been divorced and they wanted everybody and all their previous spouses to sign everything. But that ended up closing 1 week after the Northern Arizona lot closed. So I ended up netting $40,000 in August.
Man.
It was a good month. It was a good month.
And remembering that you started this in the previous November. So we're talking about like a fairly short time frame here that you've made like more than a lot of people make in a year, I mean, and this is just doing this on the side, like as a stay-at-home mom. I mean, that's incredible. That's really, really cool. Yeah.
I was pretty pumped. Yeah. I was pretty excited about it. And at that point I kind of took away, I had those properties in Arizona that I can't complain. ROI was great on them, but it felt to me like I was sitting on them for a long time, which really isn't a long time. It was the longest I held one was probably 2 months. But
it's ridiculous.
I know. But, I think it's when you're getting started and I wanted the money back out so that I could go buy more property. Yeah. So it felt like it was taking a long time and I was making price cuts too soon. Now that I have a little bit of capital, I would let that sit and not worry about it. I know that eventually that would sell. But at the time it felt like, you put out that article. It was like 50 places to post for free. And I think I probably posted in 40 of those places.
Oh, really? No kidding.
I went through like
That's awesome.
I said all kinds of stuff. I was like, and now I'm on Connected Investors and I'm getting connections with
Sure.
I've never heard of those places before. So, those eventually did all sell. But what I learned was, when you have property in an area that is, I think it's probably also a function of it being a really hot market right now. In desirable areas, wow, you could sell them really fast and probably for more than half of market value.
Yeah.
So then if you can do that, you can offer more and potentially catch more of them on the acquisition side.
Yeah.
So I adjusted my strategy a little bit at that point, and I focused a little bit more on, instead of going kind of a mile wide and an inch deep, on just blasting out, rural vacant land, more like a mile deep and an inch wide, and spending a lot of time pricing just a few mailers. So I made I netted $40,000 on a $150 mailer. Oh. I mean, yeah. So that there was a little bit of a lesson there for me. I think there's still a place for the rural land, the cheaper land, especially when you're getting started, you don't have a lot of money. There's a place for that too. But thinking to kind of integrate both strategies to have a little bit more of a well-rounded, play from here. So
yeah, I think the cheap properties are really, really good to learn on for sure. I mean, it's really hard to jump in on your first day with no experience planning to do like 50 grand a pop. Like I don't know. I just don't think it works that way. Like maybe there's like a 1 in a million chance, but like I would rather make my mistakes on the really cheap ones. And I mean, if you make any mistakes, it doesn't sound like you really even made any mistakes, just looking at the numbers and how your process went. So, now with that wholesaling deal you did, like, would you say the wholesaling process, like, assigning a contract and not putting any of your own money into it and waiting for the title company, like, is that more or less work than just buying it cash? Like, would you prefer that approach, or would you prefer just buying a property outright?
Yeah, I've actually thought a lot about that since. Yeah. So it ended up probably being more work. And I felt like I had less control over the process because what I had was equitable interest in the property as opposed to just outright owning the property. So I felt like I kind of just took what I could get as opposed to feeling like I have full control over this. There's a lot of things I can do with it. I don't know that. I think there's a place for both strategies. And when you're in a place where you're not so certain about the value of it, if it weren't for those power lines running through that lot, I would have kept it and I would have thought about doing something with it because there was some major potential there. I think what they're going to end up doing with it is building some sort of storage structure because they're builders and they need some place for their tools, which is perfect for a power line property. Yeah. But I wasn't sure about the value. And, at that time I was tying up a lot of my money with another property. So I didn't have the money to buy it outright anyways. In those situations where you don't have a lot of other options, it's great. I think it's a really good way to go. And if you want to go out there, especially if you have an end buyer, if you have somebody like a builder maybe, and I've kind of moved into doing a little bit of this where I know there's houses going up, so just calling up builders and asking them, hey, what are you looking for? And if I can get you what you're looking for, how much you want to pay for that? And then just pricing your offers, subtract out what it is you'd like to make per property and going from there. And essentially you're doing the same thing, but with an end buyer already. It's a little bit more difficult. If you're just going to post it, just, Craigslist and throw it out there. If you don't have an end buyer already in mind, then one, you're talking to people that have no idea they think it's a scam, right? They're like, okay, so you don't own the property. They're confused about the process. Yeah. That's probably also me just not explaining it very well. But, so yeah, you're definitely a little bit limited in what you can do. When I was going through the actual closing with title, had it been me on my own, I would have found out about the well issue and then found out there actually wasn't a well issue. And then I would have priced it appropriately as a result of that. I felt like it was a little bit out of my control. Also, I used the end buyer's title company because he had somebody he really liked. She said, she's a rock star. She can close anything. I understand wholesaling. She can do this type of transaction. And that made total sense to me because, I'm not the end buyer. I'm not even the owner of the property. So yeah, go ahead, use whatever you want. But oftentimes, and I was okay with this, I felt like an idiot during the process. And I was okay with that because it was my first time going through, but the escrow agent was like, yeah, like, what's the deal with this well? I'm like, I don't know. Well, let me go find out. So I call over to the seller and they're like, there's no issue with the well. Call her back. There's no issue with the well. So you're playing telephone in a way as opposed to it being yours and having more options with what you can do from there. Like, okay, you know what? If you don't want it, that's fine. Since then, I had that ad up for like an hour. I still get calls about that property. So I know that it was very desirable. Had I bought it outright, I would have made more money on it. There's no question. But, again, with your options limited in terms of capital and not being quite sure what the value of the property is, it's a really good option. It is. Or if you want to get into, like, let's say you have a $200,000 lot and you don't want to take the risk or have the money for a $200,000 property and make, $20,000 or $50,000 on it. I think it's a totally viable way to go. You just have to, I think, just be really good at explaining what it is that you do, and probably have an end buyer in mind. Yeah,
there's a number of really, really good points you just made in the past few minutes there. First of all, the whole idea of having an end buyer in mind, that's huge. And I don't know a lot of people that do that, but I can see how beneficial that would be, especially like finding somebody specific and understanding what they want. I mean, that eliminates so many wrinkles from the process, like what you talked about, just listing it on Craigslist and then trying to explain it. And there is something squirrely about it. I mean, when you don't actually own it, there's a lot of weirdness there. And also just the point about, like, I know a lot of people have this mentality, like once they're out of cash, like they're just kind of done. Like they kind of have to wait until something sells. But it's like you really do have options. And it's not necessarily like the cleanest, easiest, simple way to do it, but like you can still keep the ball rolling. It's not like you're just stuck.
Exactly. Yeah, totally. There's definitely a place for it, kind of in your tool bag.
Yeah.
So.
In terms of like getting your property sold, I know you said, Craigslist, you've listed on 40 of those free websites we talked about in that blog post a while back. Any other kind of tricks, or like, do you have a buyer's list that you've been building or anything like that?
Yeah, this goes back to me not being like the most super organized person in terms of keeping track of things. I do have a buyer's list, and I have a MailChimp account now, and I've got like, I don't know, 15 or 20 people on there that I send it out to. But really, I found a lot of success in Zillow, posting for sale by owner, which is another wrinkle when you have it under contract and you're wholesaling it. The question is, can you post it for sale by owner because you're not really the owner? That's kind of a gray area that you have to decide if you're okay with, I think. But so Zillow for sale by owner when I do own the properties. Craigslist, I do have a little bit of a trick I use with Craigslist.
What's that?
So I have 5 accounts that I use. With their associated 5 different email addresses. And typically you can post like 2 or 3 times per account per day before they flag you, or I think it's like they ghost you where your ad is just gone. And so I will, when I'm being really aggressive, like I had to with some of the more rural properties, I'll go down and one day I'll make a spreadsheet with like the different email addresses associated with each account, the cities I'm posting in, and I'll just put like X through like each one and keep track of all the cities I'm posting in. You can get really fancy and like change your IP address and stuff like that so you can post outside of your area, but I haven't done anything like that. But I will go in every day, and so I can post up to 15 times with those 5 accounts. You can go up as many as you want to, but I usually kind of wear out by about the 5th account done. And then go on the next day, and instead of renewing them, but posting them again with maybe a different picture so that when people are scrolling through, they like, I've seen that one before, but maybe you catch them because they don't realize it's the same property. So go through the second day with a different picture, the third day with another different picture if you have one. By then you should be getting pretty good traction if Craigslist is going to work with you. You know, that $49,000 lot, all cash, came off of Craigslist.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so usually, and I don't know, I guess personally, I probably wouldn't think to spend almost $50,000 cash on a property off of Craigslist, but there's somebody for everything. So I would definitely not discount Craigslist, just the volume on that site. I have my own website, my selling site, and I did put them on Connected Investors is one that I use now.
Oh, cool.
Actually, Bigger Pockets. I've posted some properties on Bigger Pockets now.
Is that like in their marketplace forum or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
cool.
On their marketplace. It's a little more of a sophisticated buyer. So if I'm looking to wholesale a deal, generally they have a better idea of what I'm talking about.
Sure.
Let's see, what else have I done? Those are pretty much the big ones that I've used.
Yeah. So would you say like have the majority of your buyers come from Craigslist, or like have any come from Zillow that you've been able to track, or has anything just been a total waste of time?
Yeah, which just reminded me, not that it was a total waste of time, but LandWatch. I was using LandWatch until just a couple months ago.
Okay.
And I put everything on there, and I did get some leads, but I never actually closed anything off of LandWatch. So I canceled that, which was nice because they increased their price to like, I don't know, you probably know better than I do. It's like $89 or something a month.
Yeah.
Kind of just overnight, like I got an email, it's like, next week you're going to be billed for this.
I think that was because they got acquired by the Land and Farm, a CoStar company or something. I think that's part of what caused that. But I canceled my stuff with them too. Not that they're like bad, but I was getting better results other places. But
yeah, I think that Zillow and Craigslist have been my 2 best sources for leads and actually closing on properties, and those are free. So
sounds about right. I'm not surprised to hear you say that. In terms of like any specific tools or resources, I mean, is there anything that's been like super helpful, like that you just couldn't live without?
Well, I would be remiss, and you did not ask me to say this, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention both your blog and then also your course. I mean, if you're really serious about, getting into, really anything, you can do it on your own, right? Like I could go and buy a piece of property on my own and figure out how to sell it. this business conceptually is simple. You buy land and you sell it for more. But there are a lot of complexities and details on the way in the path of that simple process. And I mean, you've done a really nice job. You've set up in a really linear fashion. Start here and then move through these steps, and then here's where you end. So that has saved me so much time. I mean, when I decided last October, November that I'm really going to do this, that having your course was probably the difference between I bought property and I sold it within a month that then let me snowball to where I am now very quickly because of that. So thank you for that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
From there, I would say another resource that I have used is Lead Propeller for my sites.
Sure.
Kind of my personality type is I could probably spend 6 months designing a website if I wanted to.
Yeah.
Lead Propeller is really nice because if I wanted to, I literally got a buying site and a selling site put together in one day. So you can't beat that. It does cost a little. You have to put a little money up front. It's a monthly cost. I think they've actually gone up a little bit recently. But if you're serious about it, you just can't beat just being online right away.
Yeah.
So, and you have an online presence. So when I was sending out those just general solicitations, I was tracking with Google Analytics. I could see people were hitting my website, and so you instantly have some credibility. I'm doing this from home at 2:00 in the morning. I'm writing envelopes. If people see that I have a web presence, it makes a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I would say that the county sites are huge. So one of the things in what you have posted is to pick counties that have good online resources. And at the beginning, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. But now that I've done some transactions, it makes a huge difference. If you can go on, like I said, I was up for 5 hours that night. I was mostly on the county site going through on that property, seeing chain of title, the GIS maps and things like that. And once you kind of have an idea, and I can see how much they paid for it and how much the neighbors paid for their lots, and I can verify the Zillow data and once you kind of have a general idea of how to work a county site, especially if you're staying in the region, a lot of them are very similar. So I can pick a county that's 200 miles away, and pretty much right off the bat, I know what I'm looking for. And if that county doesn't offer those resources, I'm not going to mail there.
Yeah.
You can get around it, but I mean, why spend the time? There's
pick
other
your battles, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, it's not really a fancy tool or anything, and it's free, but it's been so crucial to me learning how to use a county site and between the recorder site, the assessor site, if they have a GIS mapping site. And of course, Google Earth is a huge one. Earth Point has helped a lot, especially when I had that 40-acre property. People didn't understand that they were trying to pick apart the legal description. And so I shot like a little web video and I showed them how to do it on Earth Point, and brought it up on Google Earth. They were really impressed by that. So, and then Upwork, I have used Upwork. That first list that I was scrubbing initially in the very beginning, I got a little help on because it was, again, 50,000 rows. They didn't separate land out from homes. So I got a little help working through that. And then also one thing I did do is I used Upwork for copy. So I have now a blind offer and then a cover sheet. And there's just so much out there. When I started digging a little bit into, again, it's picking your battles. There's so much out there in terms of effectively marketing, and in this case, marketing when you're trying to buy a property, that I knew that this wasn't my strong suit, and I could spend a bunch of time reading a bunch of books, or I could just find somebody that does this thing. And it was probably, I think it was $250 for her to write me a one-page cover letter that effectively just hit all the points, like what's the benefit to you for selling to me, and a call to action. It was all those things. Like I bought some Dan Kennedy books. He's like a big marketing person.
Yeah, he's a genius.
Yeah, but there's a lot, right? I mean, you can spend a lot of time trying to figure that out. And she was familiar with real estate, and she was had really good copy. And so I spent a little bit of money, and now that's the cover letter I use on all of my offers, and I have since the beginning. That's
a great idea. I've never thought about that. But when you think about how many people are going to see that cover letter, I mean, thousands, and I mean, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands potentially. It's like you might as well hit them with your best shot. That's a great idea.
Yeah. So it's really, because I tried doing it myself, like a cover letter, trying to just do something a little bit different. I know that I wanted to point out the benefits to them and a call to action, but I'm so wordy. It was like 3 pages. I know this is not effective. So let me find somebody that knows how to do this well. So I did use Upwork for that. And really any little things that come up that I just don't want to spend the time on, I would go to Upwork without a question.
Yeah.
So, And then Been Verified was another one. I know Carl James has brought that up before.
Yeah.
I've looked like for neighbors and stuff to try to get their contact information. I'll subscribe for like a month. It's pretty cheap, like $19, and I'll try to get some contact information and then just cancel the subscription. So I've used that too when I needed it, or just like Googling for that information.
Cool. Yeah, I actually, when you talk about the Ben Verified thing, something I was looking into about a month ago. Have you heard of Melissa Data?
Yeah.
I kind of only ever saw them as like a resource for getting lists and that kind of thing, but they've got a ton of free tools. Like you don't have to pay for it or sign up or anything, where you can like find addresses and phone numbers and like owner names of. I'll put a link beneath this video if anyone wants to check it out. There's a bunch of different like products that they have for different types of things, depending on what you need to find. But might be another thing worth checking out if you ever are interested in that. So.
Yeah, for sure. Is that a monthly subscription, or how does that work?
Well, obviously you can sign up and pay, and when you do, you get a lot more power and tools through that. But I think one of them is called the People Finder, where say if there's like a certain person, it's like say if you got a mailer returned back to you, so you know this person's name, but apparently that is not their address because it got sent back to you. If you know anything else about them, like their age, what state they're in, a number of things like that, you just literally type their name in and it'll show you all the people by that name in whatever state you're looking for and their ages and I think a couple other things. So if you don't know nothing other than their name, it might be a little hard, but I don't know. It's if you just kind of poke around with that kind of tool, sometimes you'd be surprised what you can find. Let's see. So what's your long-term plan? Like, what do you want this to become in your life? Like just kind of a side thing, or do you want to go full-time with it, or how do you envision this playing out over the next few years?
Yeah, I think I do want this to become a full-time thing for sure. What I like to get into now is seller financing. I dip my toe a little bit into it, trying to figure out the loan instruments and stuff like that for seller financing this summer. But I got busy with other things with the kids and those other deals that popped up. So seller financing, so that there's a lot. I've had a lot of peaks and valleys in terms of income, and it would be nice to have just some form of baseline income coming in every month. That cash injections are great, but at least you can count on, or at least a certain percentage of that coming in every month. So that's going to be my next step, is getting more serious about seller financing, and then continuing on with. I don't know if this strategy of finding builder lots or kind of infill lots is something that, again, because the market's hot right now, it's a good thing, or if it's a long-term play or not. But right now it's working, so I'm going to stick with that, and wholesale when I need to, especially if I have an end buyer in mind. So some things like that. That's the nice thing about this business is there are so many different ways. You can niche down within a niche. There's so many ways you can go from here. But my next step is creating some sort of consistent monthly income through seller financing.
Absolutely.
That's next.
And I think you've used RealQuest, right? And you use Agent Pro, and you've tried the county list thing. Are there any other list resources you've worked with?
Those are all the list sources I've used, and I'd say I'm probably 95% of the time using Agent Pro at this point.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm pretty happy with Agent Pro. There is one other one that I don't hear talked about a lot. It's called Property Radar.
Okay.
And it's specific. They only have it in 5 states. It's Arizona, Nevada, California, Oregon, and Washington, which, there's a lot of land in those 5 states. But they are probably the best list provider I've seen in terms of being able to use mapping functions. And they've actually recently integrated something where if you pull up it's basically like a farm tool and a property report all in one. Okay. And when you bring up the property report, they integrate contact information, which is really cool. It's not 100% of the time, but one thing it lacks is showing you when it was last updated. So I went to that lot that I sold up in northern Arizona, and I found 3 weeks after I closed on it, and I wanted to see how recent this data was. It had the new owner in there already, and it pulls from his LinkedIn profile.
Wow.
All of his information, including his employer and his cell phone numbers and stuff like that. So it's a really powerful tool, and it's cheap. It's $39 a month for 5,000
Whoa.
leads.
Man, that sounds really good.
It's excellent. It is
check
excellent.
that out.
But it is, like I said, it's only those 5 states. But if you're going to be focusing in the West Coast, I mean, there is a lot of opportunity here. So for me, focusing on like subdivision level, it's perfect. You can draw and you can do polygons and pull results based on that. You can do, anything you want, zip codes. And then the actual criteria, the search criteria, you can get really minute. I mean, you can really you can drill down really, really far. So yeah, it's a good propertyradar.com.
Yeah, I'll link up to that beneath this video too. I don't know what it is, but I think some of that has to do with a lot of those southwestern states have like really good data too, like databases like Black Knight and CoreLogic, like the Agent Pro and RealQuest crowds. Like for whatever reason, the databases are just really, really good. They're always up to date and have like every possible piece of information on everybody. Maybe it's because of like the higher population in like California. I don't know, but I'm sure that probably helps Property Radar, because I've looked. Somebody was telling me about another, I don't know if it was Data Tree or a similar kind of service, and they were showing me a listing in California. Like, look at all this information. This is amazing. And then I looked in a place in Michigan, and a place in Wisconsin, and like 90% of that information was not there. So it's, for whatever reason, I feel like certain states just don't. I don't know where the disconnect is, but that data just isn't there. It's not being updated fast enough for some reason. So,
yeah, I agree. I don't. It's counties that like in southern Arizona that I was surprised by. I would go on there thinking, there's going to be like nothing here. Like there's who's even working in those counties? It's got to be like one person.
Yeah.
And have like the full suite of everything you could ask for from a county, updated like weekly. So I really can't complain about the data in Arizona. The other thing is, a lot of people work in Arizona. So I thought about branching out, but for now I know it. Like I said, it's nice when I can visualize exactly where that property is without even having to go look at it.
Yeah.
So that's been handy. But yeah, I don't know what the deal is with the data out here, but I agree. It's pretty good. So
yeah, there's something.
And you can't beat $39 a month for 5,000 polls.
Yeah,
and then crazy. I think if you go over, it's like 5 cents a record or something. So
which is what a lot of companies will charge you no matter what. So.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, really, this data is good no matter where you're pulling it from. So I'm going with the cheapest one at this point.
Yeah.
Because why not?
Yeah, for sure. I know we've already kind of talked about a little bit of this, but has anything sort of like surprised you, good or bad, about the land business? Like based on what you sort of heard about it before you jumped in versus doing it now for almost a year?
The one thing that still surprises me is why more people don't do this. They spend a lot of time and money and risk in houses, and not that I'm super excited about a ton of people getting into this niche, but I bought a property I bought it for $14,411, and I posted it and I made it into $49,000 less than 2 weeks later. Like I literally just made money happen. Like it's just out of like nowhere. One other tip is I've been having drone shots taken of my properties.
Oh, cool.
Especially the higher dollar ones, and they're so cool. I mean, one, it's just kind of cool to see them from that angle, but they make a big difference on the listing. So,
really? Sweet.
Yeah, so I just Googled somebody up north, and they went and took some drone shots for me, sent them down. It's like, yeah, those are beautiful. Thank you. Paid her online, and so, I mean, I just turned $15,000 into $49,000 doing basically nothing.
Yeah.
So I don't know why more people don't do that.
Yeah. Well, that's curious on those drone shots. So you're talking about like just pictures, right? Just stills? Yeah,
I haven't done any of the videos. I don't see, why not to.
I mean, that's probably not. The video is kind of an interesting thing. Like I really enjoy video, and I wish it were a bigger thing. But like a lot of like Craigslist and I think Zillow, you can link to a YouTube video, but like there's not a big prominent place for the video. It's kind of unfortunate, but I think in time it'll catch on. But it's good to hear that just the pictures by themselves is helpful. Was that like an expensive thing to get those, or was there a website you went through to find that person?
No, actually, so in this time I just Googled it. I just Googled drone photographer, and I want to say it was like $75. And she went out. Yeah, no, and she had him back to me, and I asked her. I said, because it was kind of on a side of a mountain. I said, this is she was familiar with the county sites and stuff. I said, if you can kind of give me a general idea of try to get some shots of where there's like a flat spot where you could easily put a house.
Sure.
And she was so nice that she went on there and she found the coordinates and she actually put the outline the property on the picture. So she's up however many thousand feet and she puts a box around where the property is. I'm like, yeah, that's perfect.
That's great.
Yeah. I just kind of verified what she had. Great. And sent it out. So for that, I want to say it was $75. And she was super easy to work with, really nice.
Yeah.
And I have used, recently I found thumbtack.com, which I probably had seen before, but never really paid much attention to, looking for a drone photographer. And you basically put in what you're looking for, and probably 5 minutes later, I have 6 bids. And they can range, and you can look at their, what they've done, their portfolio, and pick from there. Again, I usually just go with the cheapest one because they all look pretty good. And so I have been using drone shots on particularly the higher dollar properties. Those cheaper ones from the beginning, I was basically just using the Google Earth images that I show how to do. But if it's worth it, do it.
Yeah. Yeah, that whole thing you were talking about earlier about why more people don't do this, it's, I know what you mean. Like, on one hand, it's like, I don't want to, invite tons and tons of competition. Like, if people don't want to do it, I don't want to, force them to. But yeah, it is, I think it's just a lot of people sort of aren't receptive to the idea. Like, the whole land and dirt thing, it just doesn't resonate right off the bat. I think if they're willing to listen to the idea for 5 minutes, many people will sort of, the light bulb will go off, but a lot of people just kind of dismiss it immediately is what I've found. So, I don't know.
If you're not open to it, that's okay. Yeah, like you said, just if you're people doing it, that's fine.
Yeah.
So that's been a surprise. I guess it's kind of a good thing. In terms of the bad surprise, I've been a little bit surprised by what appears to be people having an emotional connection to the land that they own, because when you send out blind offers, they can be pretty angry about what you're offering.
Yeah.
So far as I got somebody on the phone, and she spent probably, and I shouldn't have stayed on the phone with her for so long, probably a half an hour educating me on her why her property was so valuable, and she just went into the year she's owned it and why and who's around it and everything. I was just trying to be nice to her to basically placate her, but people clearly have an emotional connection to their land that they own in the same way that they would a house, because they can be pretty upset when you send them a blind offer. And so you have to be prepared to just take that when it comes. So it's small.
The nice thing is they're allowed to say no. You're not forcing people to do anything. Right.
I don't know. That still surprises me for some reason, but that's fine. You know it. You deal with it. So. Yeah. And no, I think other than that, it's been pretty good. It's been.
Have you had any bad experiences or just flat out bad interactions with people other than just kind of being yelled at on the phone, or people who are super attached to their property, or has it been fairly straightforward other than that?
It's been fairly straightforward, but probably because I don't answer my phone live. Sure. I let it go to voicemail. I probably would have more interactions that weren't so great. But probably I've talked a little bit about the talking to the escrow agent when I was closing on that assignment contract, where I kind of felt like an idiot at times, because I was like, I don't really know about the well. Let me go find out about it. And I know she was thinking who are you? Why don't you know these things about this property? I know what she was thinking, but you know what? It's okay. I was just learning how to do it, and I'll never interact with her again, very likely. And it went through, and I made $5,000. So it's okay to feel like
it's worth it.
It's totally worth it. Just, So other than that, I'd say I've been, the worst case scenario is you lose money, and I haven't really, so far so good.
Yeah, that $15,000 property that you got, that's a significant amount of money. Even I would be like, man, I better really be sure about this. And it sounds like you really, really did your homework on that. Was there much, after you looked through everything, sit up till 2 a.m, looking at all the GIS maps and getting sure about it, was there much fear in your mind? Luckily the thing sold almost immediately. It's actually a more common thing I've found to wait for a couple months and then sell it. But was that a difficult process for you at all?
Yeah, there was a significant amount of fear. There was a lot of fear. So, but again, like you said, I spent a lot of time. I was pretty sure about it, and it so rare does it happen that you have a comp on the lot next door within 6 months.
Yeah, that's a huge blessing. That does not always happen.
Yeah, and I actually called the neighbor. So one, to ask, I would be willing to sell this for a lot less than what you paid for it.
Mm-hmm.
And two, just to kind of get an idea. I will call neighbors just to see, like, hey, this is the lot. I'm thinking about buying it. Is there anything that you can tell me about it? And usually people are super nice. They just want to talk. And this person just happened to live probably 5 minutes away from me when I called them up. And they're like, yeah, maybe we'll go up and take a look at it. And they kind of told me about this lot that I was looking to purchase. So I had not only what I could find, online, but also I just kind of had some anecdotal information from people that made me feel a lot more comfortable. But still, because now it wouldn't be as scary, but then it still would be scary. That's a lot of money. But, if you've done your homework and you feel pretty confident about the actual lot itself, and you've talked to people that are local, if you even want to go to that far, and then you get the chain of title and everything's clear, and you got through a title company, and the title company's telling you, yep, everything looks good, because she sent me the title report before we closed on it, and I looked through it. Yeah. I was still nervous the whole time. And that whole month I was just nervous about it. I was. And then I think because of that, I listed it. I could have made more money on it, but again, I did really well. I can't complain about that. It's 200%. In less than 2 weeks. And I could have gotten more, but because I was nervous and I wanted it to sell like as fast as possible, I did that whole half thing. And, I broadcast that as much as I could. Like, I actually put the comp, I pulled the Zillow link to the sold listing of the neighbor's lot, and I called it a comp and said about how it was half. I put arrows and, basically the only way I could think to get over my nerves was to just try to market it as much as I could and give as much detail about it and prove why it was worth as much as it was and make it as attractive as possible. And I had, the 4.5 weeks that it took for her to close on that, to really get everything ready so that morning I could just hit the go button and it would go off everywhere. Yeah. So that's pretty much how I dealt with the nerves. But yes, I was nervous about it.
Well, that's good to hear. Just, your honest take on how that works. I still get nervous with a lot of properties. Like if people aren't calling immediately, I'm like, oh my gosh, what did I do? But it's weird. I mean, they always sell. It's just a matter of in hindsight, you're like, I didn't need to worry about that. But when you're in the thick of it, it can be a scary thing for sure.
Yeah. And I think also seller financing, having the option to sell with seller financing is going to help with that too. That in that case, I wanted the capital. So, it wasn't even an option I actually did get a couple calls. Hey, can I put, $5,000 down and do however much? And, but I wasn't set up for that. And I really wanted the money back out so that I could go and buy more land. And, but now at this point, I think that having that available will just open up the market to more people. So,
yeah. I'm curious, what did you do in your job before you became a stay-at-home mom?
So I actually, completely different. I worked in human resources for a city. A local city. And before that, I've always been in some sort of analyst role. I'm pretty analytical. Been a budget analyst before. And so I think that helps. It's probably one of my strengths is I'm pretty analytical. I'm pretty good with a spreadsheet and that kind of thing. My weaknesses are things like writing a good sales letter or copy. So that's where I'll find somebody that knows what they're doing.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, I don't know. I mean, just from talking to you and hearing your experience and how you think about things and, talk with people, you sound like you're a natural at this. You kind of have a lot of the attributes it takes to really hit home runs and do well over the long term. And sometimes I hear people talking about how sales and that kind of thing is the most important part of a company. But I don't know. I mean, it sounds like even if you do come up short in some way, which I don't know if that you really do, but even if you do, I mean, you've clearly found ways to fill in those gaps and make it work. I mean, I think everybody's going to have something that they're not quite an ace at, and that's all right. There's ways to kind of piece it together and get to the next level. So.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And in thinking about getting ready for this interview, I don't know, because things were good before. I don't know if it weren't for kind of quickly having to leave my job, and being a little bit backed into a corner, I don't know how aggressively I would have gotten into this. I'm so, in a way, really glad that I did. But
that's really interesting.
Things were good. So this has the potential to be great. And I don't know that I would have taken that step because, I was probably on 2 years of listening to real estate podcasts as I'm commuting, trying to figure out, oh yeah, I could do that. And then I think about it for a while and it kind of fizzles out. And this one I came across, and it was the first one that I was like, yeah, okay, I can do this. It's attainable. I'm going to sit down and do it. And then luckily, I had already put those things into action. When I got to the point where it became something I needed to do, I could pick it up and really get going on it. So, yeah, I don't know. I was a little bit backed into a corner. I'm not sure that I really would have pursued it, particularly to this level, if it weren't for needing to. Because, we have good jobs and nice house and little kids that take up a lot of time, and you have to really, really want to do it. So I don't know. I don't know if I would have gotten started on it or not, but I'm kind of glad that it worked out this way.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, sometimes life's biggest stressors and things like that can be your kind of like a hidden blessing, like the silver lining that makes it work, because it just wouldn't otherwise.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
exactly.
cool. So if somebody is, watching or listening to this right now and thinking about land, or maybe they've never thought about it before, but this is making them think about it, or maybe they're even just sort of have taken the first steps and they still have a lot to explore, is there any advice you'd have for those kinds of people?
Yeah, I think maybe the personality type that is drawn to this model or this niche of real estate, it might be a more analytical type of person because it's basically a numbers game. Yeah. There's not a lot of showy out in front of a house. So this is probably going to be maybe a more introverted type person that can, as I certainly can, get hung up in the details. And because of those details, maybe just never start. So in the very beginning, I think the important thing to focus on is do the things that are going to make you money. Or do the things that are going to lead you to those early wins that you can then continue on, and it's exciting and it's kind of fun. As opposed to, like I said, I could easily have spent 6 months on a seller website and figuring out how WordPress and all that, which I don't have any idea how to do that, but I could figure it out and I would spend a lot of time. But instead, in this case, offers, sending either offers or just solicitations. And if you don't want to spend the time just saying, hey, can I buy, I'm interested in buying your land kind of thing. It doesn't have to be fancy. It can be postcards. If you do enough of those, you're going to get some calls and then figure it out from there. I kind of, when my back was a little bit against the wall and I needed to make this happen, I had that, it's I really want to do this. I'm ready. I have these 1,000 letters. I'm going to be getting these phone calls. I don't really know what I'm going to say. Luckily, you had those checklists, which made it really helpful in your module. So I had a whole stack of them and I was ready to go. But, that feeling do I really want to do this? Right before you're about to pull the trigger. And it's you know what? Just do it and you will figure it out. If you have some resources in particular that you can acquire, you can learn, then just do it and do the things that are going to make you the money that are going, then you can come back and you can spend time on a fancy website if you want to, or you can figure out how to fine tune a cover letter or all the things that you can do are things that you can get hung up on and never actually start, as opposed to focus on just those things that are going to make you money. Yeah. So do that first and then fine tune from there. Would probably be my biggest word of advice.
That's great advice. Really appreciate you saying that. It's I know there's lots of things you can just kind of spin your wheels on that kind of make you feel like you're getting somewhere because you're working, but it's that's not actually going to result in anything. So it's a great point of clarity to keep in mind.
Yeah. If it's not going to result in anything, you're less likely to continue to do it.
Yeah.
Because what's the motivation?
Absolutely.
I have a really fancy website that does absolutely nothing for me. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Well, before we wrap this up, Callie, is there anything else you want to share? I've gotten a ton out of this. I really appreciate you doing this with us.
Thank you. I appreciate being here.
Yeah.
I think probably my last bit of advice that I had some notes written down to make sure that when you actually go out, and this is kind of running in conflict with what I just said, but go out, send out the offer letters and do what you need to do. But then when they come in, before you pull the trigger, make really good sure that your lot has access. Because that 40-acre property, it turns out I had people go out and take a look at it, and there was a lot just north of it that they had actually they barred it up, and so you couldn't get to this property.
Oh, wow.
I ended up selling to a neighbor that knew kind of the back roads and how to get to it. But do what you can to make sure your lot has good access. And that was frustrating for me for a little while there, because I was like, okay, well, now I own this lot. Now what am I going to do with it?
Yeah.
But you know what? You figure it out. I started calling the neighbors. Do you or anybody you know have any interest in this 40-acre lot? It's beautiful. You just have to know how to get to it. And then eventually somebody's like, yeah, I do. I know somebody that's interested in that. So
that actually made me think of a question I meant to ask you earlier. When you're saying you're calling neighbors, where are you getting their phone numbers from? Is that the Ben Verified thing, or?
Yeah. So sometimes I find that if you live in a house and you have a landline for like a long time, like my grandparents do, you can just Google their name and you're going to find their phone number.
Okay.
If you can use Ben Verified to get email addresses, or sometimes the number doesn't work and you have to move on. But with a little bit of internet sleuthing, you can pretty much get a hold of anybody that you need to.
Sure.
Sounds like most of the data. I need to add that to my repertoire.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, sweet.
So yeah, that's what I'll do. I'll just call around and talk to people.
Awesome. Well, Callie, thank you again. I can't tell you how much I appreciate your time and just your willingness to share all this stuff. I know a lot of people are going to be helped by this immensely. So thanks for sharing your wisdom and your experience. And it sounds like you have a long way to travel up still. I mean, you've been doing this for less than a year. You've already had like really, really good success, like the kind of success everybody wants when they're first thinking about this. It just seems like you learn a lot of lessons from the experiences you have, and there's a lot of potential in front of you. So I'm really excited to see how this goes for the next year and 2 years and 5 years, and hopefully you'll stay in touch and let us know how it's going.
Oh yeah, for sure. Thank you very much. I appreciate being here.
You bet. All right. Thanks, Callie.
Bye.
See ya.